from up above.
Did you know that there's one book in the Bible that does not mention God's name? Y'all already know what time it is. It's Bible story time. If you're new here, I tell Bible stories in a way that's easy for this generation to understand. So the book of the Bible that does not mention God's name is the book of Esther. And even though this book of the Bible never directly mentions God, it is beyond clear that God is all up and through this story. So let's jump into the full story of Esther. So there's a king named King Xerxes that decided in the 3rd year of his reign that he wanted to hold the most bougie banquet ever. He decided he wanted to stunt on everybody for 6 whole months with this banquet, y'all, just to show off how rich he was and to show off his empire. Then after this whole exhibit, he threw a week-long party for everybody in Susa. And while King Xerxes was throwing this party outside, his wife Queen Vashti was inside throwing a party for the women. And it was all going good to the 7th day of the party. So on that day, the king had got tipsy and he ordered his personal servants to go get Queen Vashti to flex her crown and show off how beautiful she was. But she refused to come out. So that made King Xerxes lose his temper, and his manhood was so hurt that he decided he wanted to take legal action for this. So this man called up the 7 highest ranking princes of Persia and Media in order to see what he should do. So one of the princes spoke up and was like, you know what? She didn't just insult you. She insulted all of us by doing this. Now all the women finna be running around here thinking they running something. So their final decision was to permanently ban Queen Vashti from the king's presence and to find the king a new woman who knows her place and to make her the new queen. But of course, the king started regretting his choice after he had calmed down. But his attendants was like, sad hours are over. We finna go find you a new woman. Come on. So they had virgin women from all different parts of the king's provinces come, and they were brought to Susa for the king's eunuch, Haggai, to put them through beauty treatment. And whatever girl the king liked the most after this would be the one to replace Vashti. So moving on, there was a Jew named Mordecai who lived in the king's palace complex. And Mordecai had raised his cousin named Hadassah, or otherwise known as Esther, because her parents had died, so he adopted her. And Esther was among the girls given to Haggai to see if she'd be chosen to be the king's new queen. And Haggai liked Esther off the bat. He immediately gave her special treatment. Oh, by the way, Esther was beautiful. But one thing to keep in mind is that Mordecai had told Esther to not give up any information about her family or racial background. And Esther did as she was told. And when it was Esther's turn to go to the king, everybody adored her already. Fast forward, the king fell in love with Esther, head over heels. And Esther was chosen as the new queen. But even after becoming queen, Esther still did as Mordecai had told her and didn't reveal any info about her race or her family. And one day, Mordecai was chilling at the king's gates when he overheard 2 of the king's own eunuchs discussing how they wanted to kill the king. So Mordecai told Esther, and Esther told the king. And of course, Esther gave Mordecai the credit for telling her. So the 2 men were hung, and that was the end of that. Then sometime later, the king ends up appointing a man named Haman as one of the highest ranking governing officials. And all the king's servants would bow down to Haman as the king had commanded, except for Mordecai. The others kept questioning Mordecai for not bowing down to Haman, but Mordecai wasn't budging and he told them that he was a Jew. But when Haman saw it for himself that Mordecai wasn't bowing down to him, he lost it. And then Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew as well. He was like, okay, it's one thing to kill you, I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna also kill all the Jews. Haman even took it as far as telling the king that he would spend his own money in order to have all the Jews in the kingdom killed. And the king was just like, okay, it's your own money, do whatever you want to do. The king had really approved of this, not knowing that his new queen that he was so in love with was a Jew herself. So the message was sent out to every province in the kingdom that the Jews were to be killed on the 13th day of the 12th month. And when word got to Mordecai about this, he grieved along with the other Jews. Then word got to Esther, so she sent somebody to give her an update from Mordecai. And Mordecai gave her the full rundown of what had happened. So Mordecai and Esther went back and forth through the messenger a few times. And Mordecai had told Esther through the messenger to please intercede and plead with the king about this. So Esther had the message delivered to Mordecai to have all the Jews fast from food and drinks for 3 days. And Esther also said that she and her maids would do this fast with them. Esther said that if they do this, that she would go and talk to the king, and that if she dies, she dies. 3 days later, Esther went to the king and he allowed her to talk to him. And there was a whole process within itself for Esther to be able to go and talk to the king. It's a lot more to it, but please be reading your word for yourself so that you can get all the details of the stories that I tell. So Esther goes up to the king and he's like, hey, sweetie, what you want? Like, you can have anything from me. I'll give you both my lungs if you ask. Just say the word. So Esther told the king that she wanted to have dinner with him and Haman the next day, and that then she would tell him what she really wants. So of course Haman agrees to go to dinner, but him and his wife have a conversation before this, and she tells Haman to have gallows built for Mordecai to be hung on. And Haman liked that idea, so he really had the gallows built that night. Later that night, the king couldn't sleep, and so he starts going through the daily journal of events. So the king came back to the news of how Mordecai had really saved his life, and he was like, wait, did we give Mordecai anything for doing this? And the king's servants let him know that he hadn't given Mordecai jack squat for what he did. So the king ends up asking Haman what he should do to honor a good man. So Haman's like, oh, he gotta be talking about me. You know what? Get a whole procession going with some horses and a purple robe and all the above. So the king was like, oh, okay, good. I like that idea. Go get Mordecai so we can do it for him. And that clearly was not the answer that Haman was expecting to hear, but he went ahead and did what the king had ordered him to do. And Haman went home in shame afterward. So Haman ends up going home and venting to his wife and friends about what he just had to do. And they basically straight up told him, yeah, you're screwed. Then he was rushed off to dinner with the king and Esther. So while they're all at dinner, the king asked Esther to go ahead and say what she wanted from the day before. And she straight up said, I want my people saved. Somebody's trying to massacre them. So the king was appalled. He was like, what monster would do that? So Esther was like, this op right here sitting at the table with us, Haman. And Haman was too stunned to speak. Haman was pleading with Esther for his life, but he knew it was over with. And Haman ended up being hung on those same gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And on top of that, the king ended up giving Esther Haman's whole estate. And Esther ended up putting Mordecai over that estate. Even though Haman was now dead, Esther still needed his whole plan to be revoked. So she talked to the king about it. So the king agreed, and Mordecai was the one to write out the new instructions to the provinces under the king's name. And this new message authorized the Jews to arm and defend themselves. And the Jews ended up overpowering all the enemies. And this led to Mordecai becoming a powerful leader in the palace, and his reputation was known all over. The Jews had even killed Haman's 10 sons and had them hung out publicly for everybody to see. And Esther had the king extend the terms of the order for another day. After the Jews got victory again, they celebrated and feasted. And Mordecai made it a tradition to always memorialize that day. And Esther used her queenly authority to endorse that. So Esther really was made queen for such a time as this. So that's all for this Bible story time, but let me know what story you want next.